So, for our final segment here today, we're going to move into the NHL. So, not all NFL this week. We had it all last week. Can't happen again. Can't happen on back-to-back weeks. Got about to talk about something else. And thankfully this week, there is something else. There's a pretty big story in the NHL, and that is the Oilers giving Leon Draisaitl a massive deal. Biggest in NHL history, I believe. 8-year, $112 million, $14 million average per year. Absolutely insane deal. And instantly tells you which way they're going to go on the entire storyline of this entire offseason, being with that team being like, obviously Bouchard's contract's coming up. McDavid, I think, is coming up as well here. Those two guys are going to need fairly big deals if they're going to be staying in an Oiler jersey. Signing Draisaitl to a $14 million contract for 8 years means that one of McDavid or Bouchard is going, and it ain't going to be McDavid. So I think that makes things very interesting for what's going on into this, what's going to happen into this next maybe not this season, but after this season for the Oilers. Next off season for the Oilers is kind of what I mean. But I'll toss it over to you, Caleb. Just what are you thinking right off the jump when you see a contract like this for the Oilers?
Well, I think what you just said is kind of the most interesting part of it in terms of you mentioning can they keep, because they've got their big three up for a contract extension in these next couple of years. Now you've got Draisaitl done, you've got one of the three. Can they get the other two done? I think they can, and I think they will. I have a hard time seeing them let either of those two go. Obviously, they're not going to let go of McDavid. I think that's pretty much a given. Even with Bouchard, I think having that young number one defenseman that played as well as he did, I don't think you let that go. So it's just interesting in terms of how do you continue to have a Stanley Cup contending roster when you pay this huge of a percentage of your salary cap to these three players. And I think this one detail, I don't think we have the exact contract details out yet. I've tried looking it up in terms of like how the breakdown by year is. This one has it, spottrack.com has it as the same cap hit every year. I don't necessarily know if that's correct, because the report from Pierre LeBrun on September 3rd said that the contract was very front-loaded. And I think that's pretty key here in terms of they want to kind of get this out of the way so that they can almost, in essence, reload and have room for these other players in the future. Because if you get this Draisaitl contract to be pretty big now, you're significantly less handicapped. Maybe you can stretch out your window a little bit. Be very interested to see if they do a similar thing with the McDavid and Bouchard deals. But no, I obviously, whenever you keep a player of his caliber, it's a good thing. It just, it's the reality of having a good team with these kind of good players. You're going to have to pay them, and that's going to cost you opportunities and other players in the future. So if you're an Oilers fan, you just have to hope it doesn't kneecap you too much in terms of making future runs. But it sounds like they got on it early, they got it done, and I mean, by year 4, 5, 6 of this contract, it's probably going to look like a steal with how things go in this league, right? And especially if it's front loaded.
Assuming Draisaitl stays at the same level that he is right now, absolutely. I mean, we're already gonna McDavid's contract starts to be able to be renegotiated here, like next season. I think is when the soonest they can do it, and he's going to be getting probably a bonkers deal, especially compared to this. If Draisaitl can command $14 million, McDavid's gonna reset the market. And that's not controversial. McDavid should be the highest paid player in the NHL at all times, regardless of how far in the deal he is. It's how it should be. It's not how the world works, but it's how it should be, right? It's so logically, right off the jump, Draisaitl getting $14 million means that McDavid is probably going to be getting. I could see a world where we see a $15 million contract going to McDavid, and I'm not kidding. I don't think that that's far off. And
you said 15 million?
I'm saying 15 million. I think 14.
That almost feels low.
You think? But that's what I mean, right?
I think Draisaitl's getting 14. I almost think I don't know, McDavid. I could see getting even 16, right? Like,
Yeah. Well, like I'm saying that 15 million is absolutely. In my head, honestly, when
I think it's a
I
given.
said it, you think it's a given. I it should be a given, but I don't know if it is. I feel like 15 million is right around where he's probably gonna get. I don't like 16 million. You're starting to like. I don't know. He deserves. Let's be real here. For how good of a player McDavid is, he probably deserves 20, but he's not gonna get 20. That's not how the NHL works.
Yeah.
So he's gonna get what he can get, really. What is the max he can get? And I honestly think it's probably like 15.5. I'd say that's realistic. 16 would be mind-blowing. I wouldn't necessarily count it out. I wouldn't I'm not going to die on this hill that I don't think McDavid gets 16. I think I would be surprised is kind of what I'm saying. So you feel free to come back here in 2 years and laugh at me. But I think right now I would be surprised to see him get 16. But even regardless, that means that, let's say, if we assume 16 million, that would mean $30 million to the Oilers' top two centers. Wow.
Yeah.
That is a crazy amount.
But that's kind of been the reality that they've had to live in, right? Draisaitl and McDavid, to a certain extent in the last couple of years, have been extremely undervalued because they signed long-term deals a long time ago. And you have to reset that clock at some point. And in the first couple of years, that's going to look really bad. It's not going to look good. But they have, both McDavid and Draisaitl have won the Hart Trophy. You have two Hart Trophy winners forming your first two line centers, forming your top two centers. You're not going to have to pay an absurd price tag for this. It's not about how ridiculous it is. It's just about the fact that if you want to keep them, it's what you're going to have to do. There's no way around it, right? So you can come around and say I don't think he's going to get 16 or any more just because the Oilers are really kneecapped there. They already are kneecapped because what else are you going to do? Let him walk? Because I think any other team would be absolutely willing to give him that and potentially more. He's McDavid, right?
Wow.
That's
wouldn't
the kind of thing
wouldn't that be crazy? I think that would be the biggest player move if McDavid left the Oilers in free agency. That would be and this is including free agency and trades. That would be the biggest player move since Gretzky going to the Kings. And
it absolutely
that's
would
not
be.
so. And I need to emphasize that might sound like anybody who's out there going, okay, McDavid, Gretzky, same level of superstardom in hockey is probably going on. No shit. But you got to understand that it has been, it happened in 1989, so it's been, oh sweet Jesus, 35 years at this point, 36.
Yeah.
Since it happened.
35 years, good.
There has been a lot of really good hockey players in those 36 years. I'm thinking Mario Lemieux. I'm thinking Yager. I'm thinking Thornton. I'm thinking Crosby, Ovechkin, all of those guys. A lot of those guys have left their teams. None of them have come anywhere close to that level of what happened when Gretzky first left. I think that if McDavid were to leave the Oilers, especially in free agency, or God forbid a trade, the same way that it happened the first time with Gretzky leaving the Oilers, it would break the NHL. I think that I was saying that I don't think he gets 16 million. If it goes to free agency, it's the Wild West. Completely new. The world is going to change.
I think that's when he might get that $20 million number you were throwing out earlier.
You know what's the funny thing? I was thinking the same thing. I just didn't want to be the one to say it. Because I think, yes, $20 million would not be...
Is it really that ridiculous?
No, it's
you're going to see some obscene number attached to him, but that's just kind of how it is. Because, this is the biggest thing since Gretzky. And, even Gretzky in his prime never hit free agency as we know it today, right?
No.
So there really is no precedent for this. I will say though, like it's not like this is going to happen though. Like I do think
No,
we should pump the brakes on it and
no.
say like he is
It's
going
a
to
fun
stay in
conversation.
Edmonton. They're going to make it work. It is just
The
a fun conversation.
the circumstance behind Gretzky leaving the Oilers the first time is not something that could ever possibly happen again. The NHL
No.
would not allow it. Because the whole reason
No.
that Gretzky left was because the Oilers owner was going bankrupt and needed money. That is the real reason that he got kicked out of the Kings. So I think they're assuming that I don't even know the name of the Oilers owner now, but assuming they're
Is
like
that Peter Pocklington at that point?
yeah, something like that. Like assuming he isn't like running out of cash here. The NHL and the Oilers are in a much better spot than they were in the 80s money-wise. There ain't a way in hell that is happening again, which means it just would need to happen naturally, which the Oilers would have to be stupid. They would have to be so stupid to let it happen. Like, they would have to actively spit in McDavid's face when he asked for whatever amount of money he asked for. Because, honestly, if you're the Oilers, what's going to end up happening is you just hand McDavid a blank check. Truthfully, I think that's what you have to do. Whatever amount of money he wants, he's going to get. Whether it's in Edmonton, whether it's somewhere else, it doesn't matter. He's going to get it. Like, he has the level of superstardom that he will permanently, if he wants to cause chaos, in a magical, mystical world where McDavid leaves the Oilers, he would completely reset the way that NHL money works as a whole. He would get a bigger contract than anybody ever by a ridiculous margin. Like, and I'm not just meaning like in the way that Leon Draisaitl is the first one to hit 14 million. That's not what I mean. I mean in the sense of McDavid is getting 3 or 4, maybe 5 million more than anybody else because he's that good.
Yeah.
And he can
because he's that good.
Because he's that good.
And it creates just such an interesting bit of cap calculus here, and that's why this Draisaitl deal is so interesting. That's why we spent most of this segment talking about the player who didn't get an extension.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Well,
because it creates such an interesting problem. It is really a catch-22 for the Oilers. There are no right answers here because you go into this and you think Draisaitl, McDavid, Bouchard. They're all probably going to get more than 10 million. Bouchard may be the only one where you're thinking like maybe he'll get a little bit less. But around that range, right? They're all going to be these massive contracts. What do? You can't not pay those players, because if you don't play those players, then you lose a huge reason as to why you were competitive and why you went to the Stanley Cup final last year. Those were your 3 best players. They're the reason you got there to a large extent. You can't just not pay them. But if you pay them, then you lose the opportunity to sustain some of the depth that you had. That was a big reason that you got over the hump. You've had McDavid for this long, but you haven't necessarily done anything with it up until this point. By giving out these big contracts, you're kind of kneecapping your ability to get depth. There's no right solution here, which is why I think they're doing these little things that they can to make that pain a little bit less. Front-loading contract, jumping on it early. They should get McDavid done as soon as they can so that investment immediately starts to pay off, and contracts will just keep going up, and eventually will become undervalued. But yeah, no, I just think it's such an, like the Oiler, like not Ken Holland anymore, Stan Bowman.
right,
Stan Bowman in these next few years is going to have one of the most difficult GM jobs in the league with how he handles specifically these contracts and how he manages to build his team around them. It'll be very interesting. And I mean, he prolonged the Blackhawks dynasty maybe longer than it should have. So who knows? Maybe he's the right guy. Maybe he's not with some of the later moves in his career. But we'll see.
Yeah. And something I wanted to say as well, just to throw it in there, is the fact that a big part of why I think Gretzky never really did what I think McDavid has the potential to do here, in the sense of like resetting the market, is there's a lot of stories. I remember reading this a long time ago, so I'm probably gonna get details wrong. So I'm gonna say that before anything else. But I do remember reading in Gretzky's book about how the negotiations after he got traded to the Kings went something along the lines of LA trying to give him a ridiculous amount of money and Gretzky not wanting to take it because he wanted to make sure he wanted to bring in good players. So he didn't want a lot of money. He basically wanted nothing. So the negotiations went along the lines of LA pushing to pay him more and Gretzky pushing to pay him less, which is really funny. And it's not gonna happen here.
No,
That's something that would have happened back then. McDavid's gonna get a bag. He is gonna get a
culture
bonkers.
Is
He's gonna get a
the
bonkers amount of money.
Now.
Yeah, like I wish I could pull the exact like. I don't have it anymore. It's somewhere on that shelf. It's somewhere on that shelf on some page, but I remember reading that and like it's stories like that that show you the type of person that Gretzky was back then. Like, but yeah, no, absolutely. Like it's gonna be insane the next few years. What's to come? A lot of people are shocked by how little NHL players make compared to a lot of like pro players. McDavid, if anybody's going to do it for the NHL to elevate it, or at least elevate it to another level compared to what they are now, McDavid, he'll do it. He's the one to do it, right? We've waited however many years now since he signed that initial deal that at the time was insane. Now we're looking at it and it's like, I have a funny feeling if I were to give a prediction, I think whatever deal McDavid signs right now, or not right now, in 2 years, is going to be still insane in 10 years. That'll be my prediction.
Well, I don't know. I think contracts get overvalued over time. Like, I don't think with how much the league and the cap and inflation changes, I don't see that happening. I could see it more like 3 to 4 years.
Okay, like, fair enough. You know what? I'll yes.
Right?
Yes, what I said was it is a little far-fetched, but I think that I'm saying that to emphasize the point of, like, the deal he should get should be absolutely bonkers.